Hey up and welcome to the Temple of Bleh. This is a conversation with product manager Matt Polen. Matt was a product manager at Roadrunner in the early 2000s. I'm struggling to sort of like qualify what period you want to call this. It could be the Road Rage period, it could be the Young Turks period. I've got to qualify that somehow. But anyway, the product managers have been underrepresented in this arm of the research, so I'm pretty happy to have a long conversation with him and broadcast that to you guys. 1, 2, fuck shit up. The way that I've been trying to conduct these interviews recently is because the schedule's so fucking aggressive. I'm like, I've got to go wide, not tall, which is why I'm saying if anyone has any friends, bring them all on. Like, I did, it was Amy Sciaretto
and Jamie, right?
Yes. Last week. And that was good because that was like, it was less research oriented and more just let's just tell some fucking stories because that's what's missing. And similarly, your role is missing from the research as well. The product managers have been woefully underrepresented. So I do appreciate you taking the time. What are you doing now then? Just out of interest. I've not done a lot of research.
So after being fired from pretty much every job I've ever had, I decided it's probably me, it's not them. So I started my own business. I have a merch company and I actually, I do on-demand printing. So like my clients are like David Bowie, AC/DC, Pink Floyd, a bunch of classic rock, like big classic rock luminaries. And so I do, you know, their on-demand apparel plus like accessories and things like that.
Crazy. Fucking hell. But that's Case's story though, isn't it? He just got fired from every job he had and then decided I'm not going to get fired again.
Yeah.
Let's do my own thing.
I mean, I wish I could have the success that Case had, but yeah, I mean, some people are just not meant to work for others. And it took me about 20 years to learn it, but I finally did.
Yeah, man. So let's, what were you doing before Roadrunner then? What age were you at so you started Roadrunner in 2000, right?
Yeah, 2000.
How old are you at this point?
I turned 50 this year.
You turned 50 this year?
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't like it either, quite frankly, but I do. I had I was in college and I worked in record stores. I actually worked in an HMV record store in Washington, D.C.
Nice.
And then after college, I got my own HMV store up in Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
And Hartford, Connecticut is like sort of like being sent to, I don't know, Siberia. It's just, it was bleak up there. And I had always wanted to work in the music business, had no idea how I was going to get into it. And I had become friends with some of the label reps in my store. And one of them mentioned that there was opportunity at Island Def Jam.
Right.
So I interviewed for IDJ in New York and got the job. And I was doing, I was a coordinator for like print work. Basically, the product managers would want posters made, or they'd want to run ads, or they'd want to make some sort of POP. And it was my job to sort of send out films and contact with the the people that would produce this stuff. And I was there for about 6 months. And it was a very interesting job because I was a coordinator, but I had my own office with like 2 TVs and a couch. And my hours were 9 to 5. And then I got paid time and a half for any time after that. And literally my job didn't start because all the product managers submitted all their stuff at about 3:30 in the afternoon. So I had to wait till it came back from the printers. So basically, like, I would sit in my office and surf the web and try to find something to keep myself busy. At 3:30, I'd get inundated with stuff. I'd send it all out. And then I'd wait another 3 or 4 hours for it to all come back. Then I'd proof it.
Yeah.
And then I could go home. So I was making more money than I ever thought someone my age should be making, doing something that really they didn't need an individual to be doing what I was doing. But I kind of realized, like, after about 6 months, I was like, I'm actually really bored. Like, I just, as much as this seems great on paper to get paid to do virtually nothing,
Yeah.
I was going crazy. And one of the product managers there was a guy named Paul Resta, who used to work at Roadrunner.
Right. Okay.
And he did the rock and hard rock artists. And so he and I would sit around and sort of shoot the shit with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was just telling him how just maniacally bored I was getting. And he said, well, there was no, what's that? Yeah, Paul Resta. Okay. He was a product manager, I believe with Cory, like in the late 90s, mid to late 90s.
Okay. I still think that's something I'll come across. Okay.
And so he got me an interview at Roadrunner, and I went in and I interviewed with Jonas and Cory, and I got the job.
Oh, sweet. Was that daunting?
Yeah. It was very daunting. I mean, it was just like, so unlike some of the other Roadrunner folks who are just dyed in the wool metalheads, I was a metalhead for a suburban Jew from Connecticut. So it's all relative. Compared to the other people I grew up with, I was definitely a metalhead. But compared to real metalheads, I was about 60% there. So it was a little bit daunting in that respect, that I just, felt like, am I pretending to be something that I'm not? But I loved Roadrunner's artists. Yeah. And had for years. I mean, I was a huge fan of Machine Head and a Fear Factory, and I was a heavy metal DJ in college, and really knew Roadrunner well and was excited about the prospects. So it was a little bit daunting, but it worked.
What was the cult? This is kind of like, it's very 21st century, this question, but what was the culture when you arrived then? Because this is like, those last few years was strange in the sense that Case tried to add like a top floor, like an MD level to all the offices. I say adding a floor, basically bringing in like major label credibility. And
right.
This is something Doug said, which was really, really cool. The culture of Roadrunner was too strong for these individuals, and for this sort of like level of professionalism that Case was trying to bring in. It's almost like they didn't know they were nailing it. They thought it was too true, and they were nailing it.
I mean, I would say that was. I mean, I was definitely surprised at how, because I came in at the 902 Broadway offices, so they had already sort of done that step up. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, I was surprised from when I got off the elevator at how clean it was and how professional it was. I think I had thought of, black walls and metal posters everywhere. And it was not that. It was hardwood floors and, gray cubicles, and it was surprisingly very professional.
Right.
And I don't know if I found that daunting, or if that actually made me a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, you could kind of climatize. It was is that a Connecticut aesthetic, hardwood floors and gray cubicles?
Yeah, I mean, it was very similar to Island Def Jam. Island Def Jam, was very sort of office spacey. I mean, it was just it wasn't the sort of freewheeling metalhead meetup that I might have thought in my mind it would be.
Sure.
And certainly, Jonas and Cory were not what I thought of when I thought of, the heads of a metal label. I mean, they're both clean cut and, short hair, no ink. And I mean, maybe it was just a stereotype that I was thinking. I mean, I had long hair and I had piercings and I had tattoos and I thought I wasn't really that quote unquote real. So, I was surprised to see that there were a lot of people there who were not your stereotypical metalheads.
Yeah, they weren't too sharp at the elbows and whatnot.
Yeah.
Where's Slipknot at this point? So this is just after Ozfest 99. So is there an understanding that this is the AAA artist?
Yeah. So I came in as they were, recording Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And was there for sort of all the drama that ensued with that. Cory was the head of marketing, and he dealt with that. But I did a lot of the sort of day-to-day tasks related to them, but he was certainly the one that dealt with it. I would, we just hear about what was going on in the Slipknot camp in meetings and things like that. But yeah, it was in the midst of that. I'm
just trying to position it, because between 99 and between 98. When did the debut come out? Was it 98 or 99?
I thought it was 99.
I think it's 99. Yeah, either way, between that and Iowa, and that 2 weeks where Iowa and Silver Side Up come out, in my head, there's like this, there must have been some confusion as to where the priorities were. But they knew what they had, but they also had this rich sort of, they had an established roster, but also this thing that was happening. And then this other thing was going to come in as well from Canada. It's just, so I always try and ask what everyone's perceptions were of like Slipknot at the time, just to sort of help contextualize the calm before the storm, I guess.
I mean, Slipknot was definitely a massive priority. And I think at the time, I mean, obviously, so I wasn't there for the campaign for Nickelback's estate, but I know, I mean, they worked 2 or 3 singles to radio for that. They had middling success, but enough to feel that they had established something.
Yeah.
I don't think that we quite knew, obviously, the explosion that was about to happen with Nickelback. I mean, I do remember it, and I actually still have somewhere, Ron Berman, Nickelback's A&R guy, gave me a 2-song demo of, it had How You Remind Me. I want to say maybe it had Too Bad on it. And so it was like, before it had been all mixed and everything. Yeah. And I remember hearing that and just thinking, look, I'm not a promo guy, but I was like, this song is spectacular. I mean, this is going to be massive. But I thought that for other things it didn't succeed. So I may not be the best, but I think that as we heard it, and certainly the excitement of Dave Lonko and his staff, was pervasive. I mean, you couldn't avoid that guys who knew much more than you did about how a song was going to react at radio, felt that they had a bona fide hit. I don't think anyone obviously thought that it was going to be in the #1 song of the year across all formats and be what it was, but it was definitely palpable that was going to be something.
That's interesting. It's weird for me because I lived through it. So to me, Nickelback saw like, it started what would now regard as like a contemporary hard rock, or at least like an active radio hard rock. It laid down the blueprints to that. I remember I did one with Ron, which hasn't been approved by him yet, so it's still pending when he comes out. And in that, I sort of speculate the contemporary artists and the legacy artists. I'm saying that because I love Aerosmith's 9 Lives, and that was like 97. And for me, for some reason, that's like the main thing. It obviously wasn't. Ron was like, no, you're fucking full of shit. There was loads of bands, like there was the post-grunge era and had like all these, like, even
there's
like
Creed, certainly.
Yeah. And things like that were really what was laying the groundwork for what, not even laying the groundwork, but they were the ones that were certainly there at the time. But for me, it was like, I had to get that mold smashed off my understanding, because as I say, I lived through it. So that's a really massive, it's a horrible thing about this period. It's easy to talk about the 80s because I wasn't there, and it's easy to look at the sources and go, well, what's more credible, and come to an assessment. But when you're there,
you have the emotional attachment to it, right? Like you experienced it on more than an intellectual level, so it's hard to detach those two. You're your way of analyzing it to how you actually just experienced it. And when it's music, you experience music if you're a music fan, right? Like you can't separate that from how you intellectually reacted to it.
Which is interesting because when we talk about Roadrunner United, because that was a project that had no precedent. You know, apart from some people might say Probot with Dave Grohl, but it's not the same. No. You know, because Dave Grohl and Friends is not the same as 56 artists over a 25, 30-year period. You know what I mean? So who are you answering to at this point? Are you coming in? You're coming in as a product manager?
I'm coming in as a marketing assistant. So basically, there was only one product manager, and that was Cory. I mean, Cory handled everything. Like he was the primary on every artist.
Really? Fuck.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, let's elaborate on the role of the product manager.
Okay, and I jotted some notes down so I could, I was trying to think of everything that we did. I mean, basically, the product manager is basically the central nervous system of any project, right?
Sure.
We're in all the meetings, whether it be the marketing meetings, the promotion meetings, the creative meetings, the production meetings. Mm-hmm. We're there to represent the bands and sort of keep timelines running. Mm-hmm. The way it starts is basically, the A&R guy comes to the product manager and says, roughly, we think we're going to deliver the album at this point, right? Mm-hmm. And then that sort of gets us going to, first off, create a budget, get a little input from all the departments on, what they think this project's going to entail and what we're going to need. And then once you have the budget, we sort of work backwards, right? We think we're going to get the release on X date. Let's go back 60, 90 days and figure out how we're going to do the marketing and things like that. But first off, you're going to start with creative department and the production department, right? You're going to get with creative and you're going to say, look, the album is slated, they're about done recording. We got to think of doing a photo shoot. We got to figure out if they have any ideas of what the album's going to be titled, and if they have any ideas what the designs are going to be. If not, then we, the creative department will give them a few different designers to choose from, and we'll start that process of working with the band on putting together the creative elements.
Mm-hmm. This is, by the way, this is fucking perfect, because the entire premise of this entire thing is that these things that we love didn't happen by accident.
Right.
And now you're going into the exact nuts and bolts as to how this process works.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest, I came into it with no knowledge of this. So I'll be honest, I was shocked at how many people it took to bring an album, successfully to the streets, right? I mean, it doesn't take that many people to just bring an album, but to do it successfully, it takes a lot.
Yeah, man. It's sorry, keep going. So the creative department, they're playing air hockey of intellectual milestones and things and assets related to a particular project, and then presumably coming back to you and saying, right, this cost this whole thing our bit, I guess, getting this designer to do that and getting that guy to do the typeset for the logo, that's 15 grand. Cheers, move on, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and it's different, the head of creative for most of my time there was a woman named Linda Kuznets.
Okay.
And she had a great sense of the aesthetics of the bands, and she also had a good sense of what designers matched up well with what bands. I mean, obviously, certain bands have a very particular idea of what their image should be. I mean, there are famous stories about Pete Steele and the exact shade of green that it had to be. And I'm sure anyone, I listened to your talk with Mark Abramson. I mean, there are many people who can tell you more about Type O, but I definitely heard about the Type O green.
Pantone 369.
Yeah, so exactly. So it's so it really depended from artist to artist. And sometimes it was great. You had an artist who could sit down and say, we have this idea of a skull and it's going to look like this. And we even have a friend who's a designer. And so and we'd be fine with that. Like, if you've got it, great. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it would be like, we got an album title. and that's about it. And so it was definitely a process. And then, it was the photo shoot, and, sometimes it was, does someone in the band need to get a haircut beforehand, or does someone need to lose weight, or all these things you never think about, right? But it was definitely a whole part of the process. But once we got that ball rolling, we then, we're in the production meetings, and we'd sit down with our head of production, and again, we slate in the release. And when you basically, we had the Roadrunner intranet, which was when you put in the release, you could then enter in all the other assets that were sort of going to be related to the release, whether it be promos, whether it be like a radio single, something like that. It could be POP. It's all different, all the things that any of the departments would need to work a project.
Right.
So that intranet was like,
so it's fucking cloud storage for projects before. I mentioned the internet a lot because everyone who talks about the internet, first of all, like 10 people claim to have invented it. From
Rich Perkins. Rich Perkins may not have invented it, but he definitely perfected it.
He definitely had that. He definitely was there with presumably BASIC or Python or whatever was going on. But everyone goes, the internet was so effective at what it did that I now, in my current line of work, use a similar model. That's what everyone tends to say, but they never elaborate on exactly what it was. So when you say like it was where you'd have all effectively your project files. And all
it was a place where you could just know sort of everything about a project.
Right.
All the dates, all the salient dates, when product would be delivered, things like that. So that, when a department needs something, they can be like, oh, it's going to be in on this date.
Right. Okay.
And so, and of course, A&R delivers something late, or the mix takes longer, or any hiccup along the way pushes it, and then everything
knocks on,
cascades down. Exactly. Yeah. So that's, those are sort of like the nuts and bolts, like the physical. We're getting going with creative. We've got our sort of core dates in the production schedule. And then now we're starting to work with maybe the touring department and the publicity department and our web marketing department to start figuring out, obviously with touring, trying to get them on a tour, or if they're headline caliber, to book the tour. And then obviously with press and the web, just about announcing a release date, starting to trickle out information, whatever the marketing plan is going to be, how we're going to sort of start unfurling it in a consumer facing way.
So is your priority in this the timeliness of it? Because it sounds like your role is more of a project manager role at this point. It's like I know product in a conventional sense in my world, product manager is like someone who aligns themselves to this one service or thing. And then they're usually a main stakeholder in the surrounding projects. But if we're talking about an album lifecycle, that's going to be one project because it has a finite endpoint. Because you want to get down to the second album or you drop the band, that instance and cycle is no longer in effect. You're now doing the next one. But it just seems like the way it's all staggering is like, that's where the administrative function of the product manager is. It's in that life cycle, not aligned to one thing. But it's less sexy to call it that, I guess, though.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if product manager is a particularly sexy term either, right? but I think that, in a way, yes, you were managing the physical product to get the physical thing into stores. But as this process goes on, we also do a lot of the traditional marketing. So we would be responsible for any consumer facing advertising. Right. So any TV spots that we did, any magazine ads, any sort of promotions that we could set up outside, with a partner, like a co-promotion. that would come directly from marketing. So we had a fair deal of creative free reign.
Yeah.
We weren't tied into just getting everything that everyone needed. I think that was definitely our core function to make sure that once a release date is set up, that we're making sure that everything continues to flow. It needs, to its end. But we also, because we're in on all these meetings with these different departments, we also, it's kind of nice to be able to, have an opinion, whether it's taken or not, but to be able to express yourself, on something with the promo guys, or with the touring people, or even a publicity opportunity.
That's good, because you've set up the Dominoes, so you can see the what's the term I'm looking for here? You can see the landscape and go, all right, if A fucks up or if A goes in a particular direction, it's going to hassle B, which will have a knock-on effect with C, and then a week before release we're panicking, because you can see that from.
Oh yeah, and that happened all the time, right? Like was a radio station getting a presents on a show going to, which the touring department might be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to screw up the chances of the promo department being able to get a competing station in the same market to play the song?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think a good way to put it is that where each individual department had a micro view, mm-hmm. the product manager had the macro view.
Yeah, totally.
Totally. And so, we sort of had our hand in everything. And, the idea was that we were there to facilitate.
Yeah, sure.
That was ultimately our goal, was to do everything we could, whether, through our own means or through the fact that, we were the primary people once the A&R guy handed it off, primarily communicating with the managers, to try to, push through whatever our different department heads are requesting. Mm-hmm. That was our job, just to sort of be there to fill in and to keep the whole shit moving.
So at what point, because we did skip a step, didn't we? Because you started out in marketing and then you migrate to product management.
Well, no, it's the same. So basically what happened was Cory left.
2003 to join Sanctuary.
I want to say it was earlier, but maybe it was. I don't remember. If someone else said 2003, then I wouldn't say no.
Well, we can consult the miracle of LinkedIn, can't we? Not that it matters. It kind of does in this sort of weirdly critical period that we like to. 2001. Okay, he was there for 3 years. 98 to 2001, then went to Sanctuary. Right. So I wonder if he went I wonder if he went before it all kicked off with Iowa and Silver Side Up, or I wonder if he.
I want to say that he kicked both of them off and then left. I want to say that.
If I was Rod Smallwood and I saw those 2 albums coming out from Roadrunner, I would be like, who's that then?
Doing that?
Yeah, he's got to be like a meerkat peering over the Atlantic.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember, let's see. So actually, he left less than a year after I started, I believe. And it was early. You know what? He might have left before they came out, because Silver Side Up came out September 11th, right?
Yes.
And I think that he left early in 2001, because I remember myself, Carl Severson, and Chris Masitka, who was the web marketing guy at the time. Cory had been, I think, either he was promoted or he was getting an office. He used to have a big cubicle and he was getting an office. And we had bought him a stereo for his office as a Christmas present.
Cool.
And he never got to use it because he left shortly thereafter. Right. So I want to say he left early in the year.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Christmas present.
But I'm not 100% sure. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're asking, so he left. Bob Johnson, who was in the sales department, got moved over to be the head of marketing.
Yeah.
And because Bob's background was in sales and not marketing, and I had been doing marketing for, I don't know, maybe 8 months. I was not a seasoned pro or anything.
Yeah.
But they bumped me up to a product manager. So I think he became director of marketing, and I became a product manager, just so that he wouldn't be handling every project.
Yeah.
So that's when I started getting my own projects.
Which is what Cory was doing. He was getting all the shit from all angles, from everything.
Yeah. So Cory would handle everything, and I was essentially the marketing assistant that I would, he would give me marching orders, and I would go make it happen.
You've got your slice of the pie off your trot.
Exactly. Yeah. So when Bob came in, I still assisted on sort of the day-to-day of some of the bigger stuff. But then started getting my own artists.
Before we go on to that, let's extrapolate on something you said earlier about those two. Cory and Bob had a profound effect on how this transition between worlds, between late 90s and early 2000s happened. Here, I'm happy to accept I'm not likely going to get to speak to them. So I'm now just going to ask their mates, why do people say, I don't know enough about them to make an assessment. I know obviously the legacy of what they went on to do is it's incredibly profound in the metal management and administrative sort of world.
Right.
But whenever we start to go over them, everyone had a lot of reverence for them. And I understand why, but I need to know some more details about this period.
So I'll put it this way. I feel that a lot of the people who you've spoken to for this thus far are sort of luminaries in Roadrunner lore, right? I'm a little bit more of a bit player.
Roadrunner lore, great. Yeah. We've got to bring it into fucking right. This is the Elder Scrolls terminology of this fucking project. So it's fine. I'm in.
But I think that the two of them, it's hard to say. So Cory, well, here, let me say this. I think Roadrunner, one of the things that made it so great was that they really did have some exceptional people. And I don't know if that is dumb luck, or, they Jonas or whoever was doing the hiring had an extremely keen eye. Some people, you have people like Carl, who you spoke to.
Yeah.
You have people like Mark Shapiro. I don't know if you've had a chance to speak to him, but
it's interesting. It's so interesting. There's some people who I've just never heard of. And then once one person mentions them, that's the name I hear for the next 3 weeks. So Mark isn't a name I come across until 3 weeks ago. Now
I know that Jamie was really close with Mark, and I know Austin spoke about Mark as well, because he was, Mark was Austin's predecessor. There were just some people who were just really, really good at what they did, and also able to be really good people, which is not always easy, right? A lot of people are really good at what they do, or they're nice people. I feel that Cory was one of those guys who was, just exceptional about what he did, and also how he did it. He had great instincts. He also had great people skills. He was not a pushover by any means, but he had a way of getting things done without ever having to raise his voice.
Right.
I think he was one of those lead by example people, where you didn't feel that he would ever ask something of you that he wouldn't do himself.
Okay. I'm trying to think of words to try to help articulate this. Okay, it seems like he's delivery minded, but omnidirectional. He seems like he's getting the job done, but he's doing it in a way where it's not a unilateral pushing things forward. Everyone's benefiting from him being in that room.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. And also obviously, I mean, his success where he is now shows just the vision that he had.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a vision for Slipknot as their product manager that he's continued on as their manager to just, unprecedented success.
Sure.
That didn't just start when he became their manager.
Yeah.
That started when he first heard and saw them, which is before I met him. But clearly he had a vision for what this band could be that far exceeded what even probably a lot of people at Roadrunner thought it could be. Mm-hmm. So I think that having that combination of vision and ability and communication skills, he was just a really good leader, a solid leader.
Right.
And Bob had big shoes to fill when Cory left. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in the end, I think, the success of the artists that he worked with sort of speaks for itself, right?
Yeah.
He was able to, he guided Nickelback through their, 2 or 3 most successful albums. And, it was let's say a fortuitous situation that Bob and Cory were great friends. Mm-hmm. And consequently, I think the working relationship that they were able to have on Slipknot benefited Slipknot, right? Like, sure. It was their manager and the person in charge of their project at the label worked hand in hand really well. And so, and Bob was immensely likable guy.
Right.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I think that those two definitely were sort of instrumental in the success that happened in the period that you're talking about.
Yeah, this is it. I think it paints a bit more of a picture. I think I'm getting some caricatures now, so thank you. So tell me about your first projects then.
So my first one ever was Killswitch Engage.
No way.
Which was fantastic because I absolutely love Killswitch Engage. But I did Killswitch, I did DevilDriver, I had 36 Crazy Fists, Il Nino, Spineshank. And then I even, every once in a while they'd throw me a bone with an established artist. I got to do Cradle of Filth. I got to do Machine Head when they came back to the label, which was like a dream come true for me because I played Machine Head when I was a college radio DJ. And one of the highlights of my time at Roadrunner was strangely when Rob Flynn flew in unannounced to ask to be let go from the label. And I was the one who greeted him at the elevator. I was like, I'm meeting Rob Flynn, holy shit. And then of course, everything that happened, I was like, oh, I may never meet Rob Flynn again. So it was good that it happened. But then I got to product manage them, which was fantastic. So, I was basically in charge of developing artists. So I had, the Agony scene, and Still Remains.
Yeah. I have a question about the Agony scene.
Yeah.
Did they have, obviously, as part of your role of developing these baby bands, let's call them baby bands, not to be patronizing, because I know sometimes
that's what we called them at the label, so
yes.
Okay.
You'll have had to see them live a lot. Now, I have this memory of a band that had an intro track. I think I must have seen it like Leeds Cockpit, but the entire band would face the ramps, and then when it kicked into the song, they'd just do 180 degree and just jump around like it was a curtain drop. And I have it in my. I remember thinking. I must have been 16, and I was just like, "What the fuck are they doing?" But I think it was the Agony scene.
Make do with what you got, right?
Yeah. I think that was the Agony scene. I don't know if you can remember if that was like maybe something that maybe they just did it on my night.
I mean, I don't remember them having done it, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me to find out that it was them.
I can't think of any other example of anything like that happening. Never mind in metal, but in show business. Maybe like a Blue Man Group or something. It was just so strange. Just really.
We're here.
So why they just stood staring intently at their arms, and then it's like dun dun. it was weird. Anyway, no, yeah. So what year did you get these projects in? What's the cutoff time when you started absorbing
I want to
this?
say I probably started getting my own projects maybe around 2002.
Right.
So I had Kill Switch's debut for Roadrunner.
Mhm.
I had Il Nino's second album. I had Spineshank's second album. I had Chimera from the beginning, from their debut.
Oh, nice.
DevilDriver first, 36 Crazy Fist first. So
did El Nino specifically request not to be released the week after Silver Side Up this time?
Exactly. Please don't put us up at radio against them again.
And it's so cool though, because that cohort of bands, that specific cohort of bands, was the other side of the fork, because you had Nickelback and Slipknot doing AAA things, and then you had this still litany of developing metal and what some would be regarded as what we then call metalcore, which is now something different. Sometimes referred to it as like new wave of American metal, and it goes left and right. We don't know what the fuck it is.
Whatever the terminology is today.
Yeah, but this is still like the breeding ground for what Roadrunner is known for, which is like shit that's on the fringe. Right?
Yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, I had Obituary.
Ah, yeah, cool.
I can't remember the name of the album though.
Not Frozen in Time.
Yes, Frozen in Time. Isn't that like a frozen at like dinosaur or serpent or something on the cover?
Yeah, it's kind of like a glacier, and then there's like a serpent, sort of like the skeleton of a serpent and sort of sneaking.
Yeah, so I had that. I had Deicide's last record for Roadrunner.
You had Scott Burns' last record verbatim. Scott Burns, like that was his last produced record was Frozen in Time.
Yeah, I had Trivium too. So I had a good mix of sort of classic. I had Sepultura's first post-Max album, The Nation.
Oh, of course, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking for some reason I was like Soulfly's first. What? No. I had a brain fart.
Soulfly. Bob did Soulfly because Max was Max.
Yeah.
And So
can you attest to the Ro Coley's story about his dad reading that verse? Is like an Indian verse or something on one of the tracks.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Shall I Google? No, it's all right. You should go back to the Ro episode. It's a good story. So let's think about this. Obviously, your role as product manager, we've got this many life cycles of many things. Who's regarded as the golden egg then? Is it DevilDriver? Because of all these
of the artists that I was working with?
Yeah, in this sort of like in this period, because between sort of like 2002, 2005, there's no straight winners. Now that we look back at it, there's some clear fucking winners. In fact, there's no losers for sure of that lineup, but there's some which are like obviously have stood the test of time and have done really amazing things, and some of them have either fallen off or weren't quite as successful. But when you think of those, the first as they're coming out of the gate, where's my money going? Because it isn't with Trivium, not them.
I was going to say, so I could tell you where the money went, which isn't necessarily that everyone at the label believed that these were the bands that were going to make it. But I could tell you that the money went to Il Nino and Spineshank.
Really?
Well, they were both bands that had radio campaigns.
Sure. Okay.
So when you're talking about going to radio, you're talking about a 6-figure investment.
Fuck. Okay. So it wasn't that they had the most viable radio applicability. It's that they had already they had the infrastructure and a campaign already there.
Well, no, it was that we felt that they had radio songs.
Right. Okay. Got you.
And so consequently, that's worked into the budget. So I mean, I think that, but if you take those two out, right? Because radio just demands exorbitant spending.
Yeah.
If you look at the rest of the roster, I think the feeling was, yes, DevilDriver, because Dez had a existing fan base.
Yeah.
But there was definitely some question as to whether that fan base was going to be hip to his much heavier sound, and whether the metal fans at large would embrace Dez of the makeup wearing and the goth scene as Dez the reinvented metalhead.
Yeah.
Which I think they did. And I think the album absolutely justified that they were the real deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that the other bands that we had high hopes for were Killswitch, Chimera. Those are probably and Trivia.
So was My Last Serenade not regarded, or was it not, didn't have a radio campaign around it?
It did not. So it was a song that got Lonko and the radio department to very excited about the prospect of somewhere down the road, Killswitch doing something that could merit a radio campaign.
Right.
But the verses were far too screamy.
For
commercial radio. But God, that band, their choruses are saccharine. They're so catchy.
Yeah.
And so I think that definitely planted the seed of, if they can deliver a song without a screamed verse, we have something. Trivium, I think, was sort of the same thing. Like, wow, obviously their debut for Roadrunner definitely had shades of classic, Master of Puppets era Metallica.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that the feeling was, well, look what Metallica had done. So, somewhere in this, I think when I met Matt Heafy, he was 18 years old. That somewhere 2 or 3 albums down the road, when he's really still just in his prime, they were going to be big.
Yeah.
And then with Chimera, I think that particularly with the Impossibility of Reason, we felt that just there were anthems, Pure Hatred was just, there were just things about it that seemed like they would resonate with the diehard metal crowd.
Was there any, knowing that you've got the macro view, are there any like massive issues that happened on that roster? Is there anything where it was like, no, we've got the creative angle for this band completely wrong? Like, for example, like, did it take a particular migration of mindsets to get the DevilDriver aesthetic to be so departed from Coal Chamber? And like, I guess for Ascendancy, that album art is like something, it's off the beaten path for the time, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that, I remember some artists. Look, Killswitch is easy to think of when it came to the art because Mike D did all their artwork.
Yeah.
So we knew that. DevilDriver, Dez had that symbol that he knew that he wanted, and so we knew what to work off of with that. I remember Chimera had a friend, I want to say it was either Todd Bell or Garrett Zunt, who sort of had the ideas for their artwork for them.
Right.
So they definitely came
loaded.
Exactly. And I want to say that Trivium, that painting for Ascendancy was, I don't remember particularly, but I want to say that it came from the band. Like it was someone that the band knew.
Right.
I think that with particularly, what we're calling the baby bands, the bands I work with, Image, these guys were metalheads, right? They weren't trying to transcend, at least in their earlier stages, they weren't trying to transcend to the mainstream, and they were metalheads. So their image was genuine, right? Like they weren't trying, it wasn't tough to get them to try to project something, because this is, it was their lives. They had dedicated their lives to being in heavy metal bands.
Yeah.
They probably looked like metalheads. It wasn't like you need to stop looking like an accountant. Although I did once get in trouble because Justin, the drummer for Killswitch, when he started, like, he was totally clean cut. I was like, he looks like he's in a Gap ad. He did not like that. But yeah, I mean, so I don't think it ever really arose. There's only one band that I recall, and it wasn't one of my bands, that there was an issue or there was a disconnect between the image they wanted to project and the music they made. And out of fairness to that band, I will not.
Yeah, fair enough.
Call them out, but they eventually came around to, okay, maybe this isn't the image that we should really be trying to project. It's not who we are.
I think that question comes from, like, again, it's having lived through it, and we all have an idea of what that time, it was new metal, it was this, it was return of the riff and all this stuff. It's easy to say that now, but when you're trying to play the guessing game of what's going to resonate with a customer, which is your job to sort of like administrate and deliver to a customer to the forward facing public, I'd love to sort of like know, yeah, make it orange. Matt Hafey says make it orange, we'll just make it fucking orange, and we don't actually know. Right. Blue's in according to Killswitch, but fuck it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's. I mean, I think at least my now 30 years in various aspects of the music business have led me to believe that, it's equal parts an art and a science, right? I mean, there are certain things that you need. There are certain, boxes you need to check off to successfully set up a campaign.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of it that's just, we think this will work with this project, and that this feels right.
Yeah.
But again, I think, when you're dealing with the type of artists that I was responsible for at the label, which were the more touring artists rather than radio artists.
Sure.
I mean, to dedicate your life to trying to be in a band, I just feel like no one's going to know how to project an image of being true metal better than a guy who is in a band. Like, they're what everyone copies, right? I mean, occasionally a band does just get it completely wrong, and people are like, whoa, what was with that? But I think by and large, going with a band's instinct more often than not is safe at the level of band that I was dealing with. I think when you're dealing with a larger band and you're trying to reach a larger audience, maybe more consideration has to be given into what you're projecting.
I guess as well, when you've got a radio campaign on one particular artist and you've got baby band, which is perhaps not quite as developed, it's incumbent on yourself to go, all right, well, here's where we go with the radio artist. We know we can probably get a headline tour on like a 200 capacity East Coast run, and we can build like that. With the other ones, we just need to hit them till they work. So send Trivium on to Ozfest, send DevilDriver supporting Lamb of God, or whatever, however all that worked. I guess that's how you cultivate the seeds, really, at that level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, our touring department, which was, headed by Harlan, I mean, did just an amazing job of getting these bands out on tours that helped really either develop or solidify a reputation.
Yeah.
Obviously, not every band can go out with Slayer as much as everyone wants to. Not every band can. Because and so sometimes they were tasked with really finding opportunities for bands that had very small followings,
or creating them, right? Because this is like the Road Rage tour era.
Yeah the Roadrunner Road Rage tour, which we and that was done specifically because we felt that we had a really strong stable of these smaller artists. And, if we were going to, we would have spent less supporting each band on an individual first of 5 bill than we could if we took it all together and said, we'll put Machine Head out there, we'll put Chimera and Trivium, and I think it was supposed to be 3 Inches of Blood, but I think they dropped off at the last minute, if I recall correctly.
We had them in Europe. I know we had Trivium, 3 Inches of Blood. It still remains. I can't remember. I know 3 Inches of Blood made it over here. Because I remember March 2005 was Road Rage, and then September was Trivium's headlining tour, because that's when Ascendancy broke through over here.
Through over there.
Yeah. So was Road Rage, was that Harlan's brainchild then, or was that just a coming together of different products going, hey, there's a potential opportunity here?
Yeah, I think Roadrunner had always liked the idea of touring their bands together. I mean, it kind of made sense from a lot of different angles that, publicity wise, you can get the same press outlets to cover all your artists, and you can use a bigger one to make sure you get coverage for the smaller ones.
Yeah.
From a marketing spend wise, angle, it made sense because you weren't sending out to support 5 different tours. You weren't spending to support 5 different tours. You're supporting 5 bands on one tour. From an advertising angle, it made sense. So yeah, I think it was really, the label as a whole really liked that idea, and I think it also was a great sort of establishing piece for the label, right? Saying like, look at all these up and coming bands we have, and don't forget there's still Machine Head.
This is the thing I'm just clocked onto. So the Black Crusade bit, I think it was after your time, but it was Machine Head, Trivium, Dragon Force. Fuck, who else was there? I think maybe In Flames and maybe Arch Enemy, but it was a predominantly Roadrunner bill. And you've just highlighted the advantages of a Roadrunner heavy bill, especially when at that point when all those bands were heavy hitters. Yeah. It's no longer like low investment, high yield across 4 different acts on an East Coast tour. It's like, no, this is an arena tour with all Roadrunner breakthrough acts.
Right.
Different things. Right. But I wonder if it was, it's a question for Rob Flynn really to say, was it devised by you as Black Crusade, or was it devised by you but not named Road Rage? Because maybe we've moved on to that point where putting the company name on a tour isn't as cool, whereas calling it the Black Crusade is a lot cooler, maybe.
Well, that's a very cool name.
Yes.
And B, I mean, you had Machine Head, who have always been a massive draw outside of the US.
Yep.
And Trivium, who were, press darlings, certainly, and had blown up in Europe before they blew up here. I mean, it certainly made sense. You didn't need the Roadrunner name, I think, to draw people, because you had 2 bona fide co-headliners that could draw on their own. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, we had Machine Head as a headliner, but Machine Head was headlining, 1,000 cap places in the US. And these other bands, could draw a few hundred here and there. So it was definitely advantageous to, I think, brand it.
Yeah, definitely. I got it. Like we said, Machine Head, Trivium, Dragon Force, Arch Enemy, plus special guests, who I'm guessing must have been an In Flames type. Must have been. Even though I was sure that it was
Roadrunner might
Shadows Fall. That was it. Shadows fucking Fall.
And was Roadrunner licensing either Arch Enemy or Shadows Fall at the time?
I think Shadows Fall have a strong connection. I need to look into that. I know Arch Enemy was the anomaly. I think
they were Century Media.
Yeah. I think Shadows Fall. I think they had one that was licensed out on Roadrunner. But no, that's interesting. Now, look, these are the things I like about doing this podcast, because I come up with like a theory. Let's call it a theory. Like, maybe they renamed the Black Crusade because Roadrunner Rage Tour isn't fucking cool. And then fucking like Monty or Doug will email me going, No, don't abandon that rabbit hole, Saxton. You're a fucking idiot. So before we move on to Roadrunner United, can we articulate, because you mentioned something about, obviously, Machine Head wasn't quite as big in the US as it was outside. Mm-hmm. So that second run, through the Ashes and into the Blackening, that's shitting lightning. Monty's words, not mine, but I do agree. Was it like that in the US? Because you, as a fan for you must have been like, fucking yes, we're back, lads.
Oh yeah, it was a thrill for me, both as a fan and as a band's product manager. Yeah, I mean, look, the band's profile, their reputation. I mean, it just felt like the band was finally getting what they were due. They'd always been an amazing live band. Yeah. They had put out great albums. They had always been willing to try something new, sometimes to their detriment, at least as far as how the public received it. But I think that, having gone through what they went through, and I listened to, your interview with Rob, they came back and they were, to put those two albums out one after the other. I mean, most bands would kill to have, half a good album in their career. They put out two classics. So it press-wise, their profile absolutely exploded. They could definitely, their cap shows definitely increased. Yeah. Which is why, now they can afford to do an evening with Machine Head, and it's just them, so yeah, it was definitely, it definitely increased their exposure. And of course it got
over here. It seems to be like both sides of the Atlantic are now on the train, as opposed to Burn My Eyes when it was like supporting Slayer, fucking smashing it, and then doing 100 cap build venues in the US. Yeah. A lot can change in 10 years. Yeah.
And it was so great to see them get the recognition I always thought they deserved. So it was really a cool experience.
Yeah. How did you, in your capacity as a product manager, were you dealing with Killswitch at this point?
Yeah.
So when Jesse leaves, are you like, fuck? How is any of this?
Exactly what I was like. I was like, what the fuck are we gonna do?
Yeah.
But look, one thing that Roadrunner did a very good job of was making it clear that A&R handles A&R and marketing dodoes their thing. There were the Young Turks meetings where we were given some say.
I don't know why I laugh at that. I was thinking I don't know who came up with the idea of the Young Turks, but like positioning it as like in a historical revolutionary context just screams Jonas or Doug.
I'm not sure who came up with it, but it was one of those places where we were allowed free reign to speak. And we had great, it wasn't like, the A&R offices were kind of separate from us. They were off in the back. But we had great relationships with the A&R guys. We talked to them all the time. They'd have us come in and listen to music and whatever. So it wasn't that they weren't interested in our opinions, but ultimately when something like a lead singer leaving a band happens, it wasn't anything that I was going to solve. It was, I love this band where, I hope we can get more than one tour, but it's all we're going to get right now. And, let's see what happens. And then of course, Howard happened.
I guess the question is more, when a singer leaves a band in that, especially a prolific band like that, what stops? What stops? Do you
Everything stops.
You have to, apart from, unless obviously touring is its own thing, and if you can find someone to fill in, you find someone to fill in. It's done on a very local level. But I suppose if it's something like, from an artist development perspective, and there's a strategy and there's an idea of where this band's going to go, then you have to sort of pump the brakes and go, we don't know what's going to happen now because the dynamics shifted, and the band that we thought was a baby band that could grow into a live stalwart is now just a baby band again, because we don't know what they could be, because there's one key ingredient is missing.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, also keep in mind, they also lost their drummer. Like everyone, obviously, like, you know, it's funny, you know, Carl's band has that song, Nobody Takes Pictures of the Drummer. Like everyone always talks about Jesse leaving, you know, it's like Tom was their drummer.
Yeah.
He left. Nobody seemed to care much. But I mean, you know, it was a matter of, I mean, certainly, you know, look, album releases are front loaded, right? We put all our marketing into making, you know, creating awareness around a release. So we had made the Last Serenade video, and that was getting its play in metal world. We had run our advertising campaign. They had already been, I think, probably #1 at metal radio. So that campaign was essentially over. So it was really a matter, and they had done that first tour with, I think it was Soilwork and Hypocrisy. And so it was it was a situation where there probably wasn't going to be a lot more invested in the band on this project. Right. Other than, you know, if they had gotten another tour, there might have been some tour support, but they were a band that was great about tour support. They owned their own van, they toured in it, so they didn't ask for a lot of money. You know, there would have been some POP, you know, some posters that we would have sent out and stuff like that. So it wasn't one of those things where we're like, oh my God, we're, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in the hole. It was, we got a good, you know, a good launch with them, and we could afford to sort of pause and see what happened next, because we weren't in the middle of a you know, multi-$100,000 campaign. Right. Which is nice, which is the advantage of being a product manager of baby bands, that when something goes wrong, it's a lot easier to stop that train. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Very cool. I think I asked that to Mike Gitter about Michael Graves left the Misfits. He was like, well, you know, as long as Jerry's there and Doyle's there. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah. Better example, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, Adam, you know, Adam is I think because he's the showy, you know, he's got the blonde hair, and he produces their music, and he doesn't look like a metalhead like people think of Adam. But I mean, that band is truly a band. I mean, and I mean, they just got fortunate, right? I mean, to lose Jesse, to get Howard, to lose Howard and get Jesse back. You know, sometimes things work out. I consider these times, right? I consider 2018 onwards as the post Last Jedi world, where we realize that no one's opinions mean fucking anything, right? Similarly, I believe we live in a post Jesse and Howard world where band disputes, or like, let's say band members slagging each other off in the press, like years after certain disputes, those days are now over thanks to those two guys, because they coexist so beautifully. Members of Bad Wolves. Yeah, there's a point actually. Yeah, which is funny because John Buckland, you know, from DevilDriver, could not be nicer. Ended up in that horrible position, but you know, but yeah, I mean, Howard, every day now I see, you know, Howard and Jesse from their current tour, you know, on Blabbermouth, you know, playing together, which is great, which actually dovetails nicely into Roadrunner United, because that's the first time the two of them shared the stage that we saw. Yeah. All right, let's start with, is there anything actually from this period? Can I find the product manager role is underrepresented in this project at the minute. Is there any other? It's not sexy. Yeah. It's not a sexy thing. But it's interesting. It's really interesting. Like, if people sort of think, as we sort of unpick the nature of a record label, and understanding that, no, there's not a bunch of fat blokes in cigars in an ivory tower throwing shit at bands. There's a whole like mechanical, there's a lot of cogs in the system which are trying to optimize the output of these bands, not necessarily for profit,
but to propagate more metal. Because that's the objective. Don't tell Monty Connor that he's trying to make money, because he's trying to make more metal, right? So if the more we learn about that, the better suited we are to delivering that in the next 50 odd years. And we have to ask the difficult questions, which is, when Michael Graves leaves Misfits, are you having a bad day? And you have to ask the dumb questions to get the answers, right?
Right.
And product management is part of that process, because you need someone to coordinate those bits. But
someone's got to make the donuts, right?
That's it. I'm romanticizing perhaps maybe too much, but it's how the sausage is made, man. So as we leave that behind, we talk about Roadrunner United, which obviously, as we said earlier, is kind of like it wasn't precedented. Is there anything from this product management era, from let's call it early 2005 backwards? Is there any stories or sort of anecdotes or observations you want to make and share before we forget?
I have a long history of putting my foot in my mouth, so I'm going to refrain.
Oh, come on. I'll let it out if you want.
I don't know. I mean, I just come away with, I have weird things. I mean, so I remember I was one of the few people in the office who was completely sober.
Right.
I was totally clean.
You and Case.
And one day Clown was coming to town, and Clown needed pot. Man of culture. And nobody, like everyone at that label, not everyone, but there are a lot of pot smokers there. And nobody could get Clown his pot. I ended up having to get Clown his pot. Like, I had friends, outside of the office who smoked, and I remember I had to go to Brooklyn. So we're in, Midtown, not lower Midtown Manhattan. I had to go to Brooklyn to go get weed. Then I had to go up to like 72nd. Clown was at dinner, or was at lunch with Jonas and Case across the street from Carnegie Hall. and I had to like walk in there and deliver him a bag of weed. And it was just, to me, like the most surreal way to spend a day, especially as like someone who doesn't smoke pot anymore. Someone
saw your job description as product manager and thought, I need some product.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was like, so you're the guy that gets people weed now. I mean, there's obviously, there's the Roadrunner holiday parties, which, are famous. And I probably remember more about them than most people do because I didn't get drunk. But no, I don't have any like crazy stories. I mean, I guess when it's the life that you're living at the time, it doesn't seem that weird.
Yeah.
Now that I'm, 25 years removed from it, I don't know.
I like talking about the Christmas parties though, because sometimes it's usually no one has like a long sustained story about one insane night. It's always like this, and something happened, and this. I feel like sometimes when I ask the question about the Christmas parties, it becomes quite. It's a sacred thing that you'll never understand, Jim. There's no point asking. It's just like this. It's behind like this an emotional vault door for everyone. Let everyone have their sacred memories and stop trying to pry in.
It was pretty. I mean, I remember especially the year that Jerry Cantrell came, and in a world, we worked in a world full of rock stars. And still, Jerry Cantrell was the rock star of rock stars.
Sure.
And that reminds me of something. So I took a personal vacation over to Europe. I want to say maybe 05, 06. I went to the UK for a couple days, and then I went to stay with a friend in Paris. And then on my way back, I went back to London, and Chimera, I want to say it was Chimera, Spineshank, and Il Nino were playing together. Mm-hmm. And there's a bar that you're probably familiar with that was like a hole in the wall right around the corner from one of the one of the venues. It's since closed, but apparently everyone knew about it. And all the Roadrunner staff used to go there.
Crowbar?
Maybe it was Crowbar. Was it really? It was really small.
I never went, but I understand it's like, that's like the place.
Okay, so maybe that was the place. But after the show, I went with the band to let's say it's a Crowbar, and Dave Grohl sauntered in. And again, like it was such a weird night because, I feel like I've traveled to another continent and I'm hanging around with bands. Like, this is like, I couldn't believe it was my life that like I'm in Europe and I'm hanging out with bands I just happen to be friends with who just happen to play to, 700 or 800 people. I thought that was amazing. And, I was just like, oh, this is so cool. And then just Dave Grohl walks in and suddenly every band I was with became like I was with the bands I was with. They're just like, it's Dave fucking Grohl. Like, it was very surreal and a very sort of cool opportunity, to find yourself in.
Yeah. No, fair. Let's jump into the old Roadrunner United then, knowing that this is a rabbit hole that we probably can't clamber out of. So how does it come to your world then? Because we know there's a lot of coordination required.
Yes. So
Mark Palmer's idea primarily, and then Monty sort of carried and adapted it to, be what it was.
Right. So, look, it went from Mark to Monty, and Monty pitched it to us, and, and we were sort of charged with A, making sense of it, and B, naming it,
right.
C, giving it an image, and then once we did all that, we had to sort of make this concept like digestible to people outside of those of us in the offices.
Right. Yeah.
So in all honesty, I inherited the project about halfway through.
Okay.
Basically, Bob Johnson had been handling it, but I believe maybe it was, they were in the midst of either setting up both Volume 3 from Slipknot and The Long Road, or maybe even the follow-up to The Long Road from Nickelback. So he was
all the right
really
reasons.
fit. Yeah.
That's 2004, 2005.
Yeah, that would be
stacks up.
Yeah. So he was really spread thin, and I think that it just came to the point where they're like, let's give this to Matt. It can be his number one priority. It needs to take some shape at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he just didn't have the time to commit to it. So it was a little bit of a weird situation because it probably should have been further along than it was in the marketing, imaging,
right, okay,
process than it was for something that probably needed more marketing and a cohesive messaging.
Can I paint a picture then? So when it arrives at you, you've probably got Dino and a load of songs coming in, because I know where he was at that time. He had because he was out of Fear Factory, but he was still doing music and he was submitting things to Monty. So there's probably that happening. You've probably got Rob Flynn sort of on the fence about doing it or not. You haven't got Matt Hafer yet, because that doesn't happen until much later in the process, a surprisingly late point in the process. And then presumably you might have Joey, but you haven't got the Manchester United inspired imagery, right, yet. You haven't got Monty doing every interview. You've probably got a release date, but you haven't got, I'm trying to paint a picture of what the position of this sort of thing was.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're looking at it very much from more of a A&R standpoint.
Right. Okay.
Whereas I'm sort of challenged with looking at it from a marketing standpoint. I mean, to an extent, and I know this sounds horrible to say, and take it within the context, the music itself didn't matter that much to me at the time, whether I had heard it or not.
Yeah.
The project was coming out, and it was going to going to sink or swim on the merits of our ability to communicate what that project actually was. And part of that was that, I think we could all feel confident that when you're dealing with those 4 particular songwriters, you weren't going to end up with a pile of shit. Like,
yeah, sure.
From
your perspective, it doesn't matter about Neil Armstrong taking a driver to the moon. You just get him to the moon, and if the golf's all right, play golf.
Right.
Yeah.
If he hits that hole in one, it's great.
Don't care, just get him there alive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were dealing with so many artists and so many styles of music, and so many artists. I think, ultimately, having listened to the album, obviously, so many artists working outside of their comfort zones in the style of music that maybe they were most closely associated with.
Yeah.
But before any of that really was our challenge, it was just, how do you first come up with a name, come up with an image, and then find a way to simply let people know the breadth of this product without having to, sit them down and deliver a small presentation to them. I
guess this is the thing though, because if you go to any press outlet and go 56 artists, 4 main songwriters, and 14 tracks on a record, they're going to go, "Oh, right, we are the world." It's like, no, it's something
they're basically
different.
Going to think soundtrack, compilation.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what a lot of soundtracks were at the time, but they were those, most soundtracks were bands' B-sides that had been recorded and just didn't make an album. It's like, no, this is all original music. Yeah. And these are the primary composers from their respective bands working without the sonic boundaries that their primary bands represented for them. I mean, this is their freedom to write as they wish.
Yeah.
And I think credit to all of them that they all exercised writing that exceeded the sort of delineated parameters of what their band sounded like.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely
fantastic that it happened that way. But yeah, when you take it to the press, all they do is think, oh, it's 16 songs by 16 different artists, sort of whatever. There are 4 artists who wrote them, but they're all different bands playing them. It's a soundtrack. And you're just like, no, that's not what it is. So yeah, it's, it was a challenge, which is why, I sent you that. I literally was cleaning out our house and came upon that ad that we had done, because I was like, that's how we eventually decided the easiest way to break it down. Like, it's this many captains, this many players, this many songs, this album. And in the end, I would say ultimately, I think we as a label failed in marketing that project. It should have been much bigger than it was.
I was going to ask you, like, what was the perception of its performance? Because again, rose-tinted glasses from my perspective, but a lot of people obviously revere that album and they look back on it like as a milestone, and nothing like it has happened since, which is really cool. So why do you just think the numbers weren't there and it should have been more?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, I think, we felt that we had, Monty and everyone involved had put together something really special. That, the artistic value of it, the quality of it, I think exceeded what any of us anticipated.
It had no right to be as good as it was.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, it was exceptional. And there were so many good songs, and it was such a testament to particularly the 4 captains, but to everyone involved, who played. I mean, to just make songs that were well outside of their comfort zones, and they were all good songs in their own right.
Yeah, Pete Steele just came up with a gibberish language. It's just and it still somehow works really well.
Yeah, there was so much good stuff on there, and we failed it just didn't resonate with the public.
What would you do differently then?
Look, there were, so one of our big things at the time was we had a whole segment on, I want to say, what was it called? I think it's now Pulse. It wasn't MTV. It was, I'm drawing a blank. It was the other major video outlet here in the US at the time.
VH1?
No, not VH1, because they're owned by Viacom, like MTV. It's shit. If I can remember it, I will. It'll pop back in my head. But
cool.
But we had a live performance. We had music videos.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in retrospect, we could have gone with a different video. We could have gone with different. I don't know. I mean,
The End is such a good song, though. Maybe as a lead single, because it was a softer song, maybe perhaps wasn't a representative. But I don't. Again, I can't say because I liked it. I loved it,
and I was one of the biggest proponents of that being the single.
Yeah.
So I mean, I will absolutely fall on the sword and say, like, I thought that was the right single. Our promo guys didn't think it was the wrong single. I think, there were only probably 2 or 3 songs that were really radio possible. And radio was going to be tough anyway, because of the fact that this wasn't a touring band. No one was going to be able to own this band, and it was going to pay dividends for this radio station for years to come.
Yeah.
So
and we're about to get into 360 world, so touring is going to be a factor in how you measure the returns. Let's do a pitch then. So obviously in the room, people are fighting. They're fighting for the dagger, they're fighting for No Way Out, and they're fighting for Blood and Flames. Those are your big ones. Those are your radio ones, or as close to radio as you're going to get. Right?
Well, we're certainly not. The dagger was never going to be radio. It's way too long and way too heavy. It is my personal favorite song on the album,
mm-hmm.
but it was never going to be a single.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What was the song with Keith Caputo? It was a Joey song. It sounded like a Stone Temple Pilots song.
Yep, I know exactly what you mean. The name's escaping me because I'm a piece of shit.
I could literally sing it in my head, but I don't remember what the chorus. But that was thrown out there as a single, and maybe that would have been a better.
Tired and Lonely. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, Tired and Lonely.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you can always second guess, decisions that you made. I mean, some of it was that I think, we because it got switched from Bob to myself kind of late in the process. It got muddied. Like, it didn't have a singular vision, right? Because it started off with what he was thinking of doing with it, and then it came to me, but I was already behind the 8 ball. And it's not to make excuses, just it was a very difficult project to make sense of, that was further handicapped by being split over 2 people and maybe being rushed towards the end. So yeah, I mean, in the end, I mean, commercially, it was a disappointment. I mean, I think, we all loved the album. We ended up liking the artwork and the name.
I don't like the name and the band name, but I'm like, well, I can't think of anything better. What else could it possibly be?
They threw out Roadrunner All Stars, which sounded
too much like a sports team.
Yeah, it just didn't,
The All Star session just makes more sense. Yeah.
I think at one point the All Blacks was considered, because that was Case's.
Well, first it was the rice company, and then it's
the holding company or whatever, but it was also the rugby team, and
that'd be cool. Yeah. I'll give
Yeah,
you.
I mean, we were basically, we were like, it's a team. Like the team thing was what we were trying to get across, which is hence the jersey and the emblem. That was the idea. We actually made promotional soccer jerseys.
Yeah.
That said 25 on the back and had the patch.
It's the most common picture I get sent from ex-Roadrunner employees.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Of people wearing those?
Not wearing, just like they'll stumble across it in their house and they go, oh yeah, Jim might like this.
Yeah.
I'll give you just so you don't feel so terrible about that thing that happened 17 years ago. I'll give you a microcosm of the cultural impact of that record. So at school once, a fight kicked off, and being the entrepreneurs that we did, we filmed it. It was just kids slapping each other. It wasn't a big fight. And this is the days of YouTube, before YouTube was bought by Google. So we filmed it and we put "I don't want to be a superhero" overlaid on it, because it was just kind of like, was really pathetic to see these.
Right, it did not look like a manly fight.
Yeah, it was just like funny, ironic, good song, two morons slapping each other and then just sort of looking at each other awkwardly. It was really sort of stupid shit teenagers would have happen to them. But people were always like, "Ooh, what song is that?" It was like, "Oh, it's Roadrunner United." Oh, never heard of it. Obviously, but these not like normal people, not metal people whatsoever. Like, that's a great song. So you can. Michael Graves can take solace in the fact that he touched the hearts of like 5 British stick farmers watching a shit fight on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah. Did you have a hand in the show?
I did. Yes. I mean, and that's why I had said, Harlan is definitely the one to talk to with the show, because, he dealt with all the logistics of it. I had the hand in the marketing of the show, and I was sort of, I took the bands, I took the Keith Caputo fronted band to some press sessions. I checked in on all the bands during their rehearsals, because they were all sort of spread out around town. And so I was just sort of checking in with everyone to make sure, that everything was going okay. And yeah, just night of the show, I just sort of made sure that everything went off the way it was supposed to go off. Again, Harlan dealt with the show on stage, the lights and everything like that. I was more in charge of the larger, just the event as a whole.
So are you still not drinking at this point?
Yeah, no, I haven't had a drink since 1995. And I'm still not drinking to this point, even though I have a child. So I don't think I'm going to start. If that didn't make me start, I'm just not starting.
You haven't had a drink since Once Upon the Cross.
Right, exactly. I was completely sober that night. And I saw some the show was unbelievable. I will say that I fought very, very hard to have that show filmed.
Right.
Originally, MTV had been interested in filming it for a Headbangers Ball episode.
Sure.
And then I also thought we should just film it for a DVD, but the feeling was that, these artists were essentially doing this for free, and that we shouldn't be earning money off of it. Right.
Okay.
Ironically, of course, a few years after I was let go from the label, the Roadrunner United DVD came out.
Complete with dubbed in crowd noises.
Yeah.
And re-recorded guitars. But anyway, I'm a front of house guy. I can't imagine the shitstorm that it must have been on the mixing desk, just going, what the fuck is going on? Why is there 7 of them on stage?
Yeah. And people just sort of kept coming out. It was just like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
So yeah, I could not imagine.
That'd be my worst nightmare. And I've done gigs where people have done that, and they've just gone, "Oh, let me welcome to the stage my mate Steve." And I'm like, well, there isn't an extra mic on stage, so good luck, Steve.
Steve, strum away, baby.
Yeah, it's a fucking nightmare. I fucking hate that shit when it happens. I'm sure it'll all coordinate. If ever the front of house guy for that Roadrunner United show ever sees this, hit me up. I'll definitely have him on to talk like just how much of a shit show it
Let's
must have
hear
been.
how that all went.
Yeah, unless it was like, oh, like really meticulously planned and I loved every second of it. But I can't imagine it. It must have been chaos.
You know, I feel like it was probably, I mean, it was definitely chaos backstage, but I feel like it was probably, I mean, I don't think that the touring guys left much to chance. I think it was, you know, I think there was a wrangler back there making sure that like the next people up were ready.
I know it's like, I know Andreas and Dino and Paul were like
core band.
With a core band. It's like, right, we get this, we understand this. But then the Scotty Hinge stomps out and like, fuck. I can't, in my head, I'm just like, I can just picture, even there's people on stage and they're not singing and they're just like drinking and as the show goes on, it gets more rowdy. And then eventually everyone's on stage and it's like,
a little ramshackle towards
I just can't believe that all of that was planned. From a channel perspective, from a mixing desk channel, signal flow from instrument to PA, I can't imagine it was like planned.
Right.
Yeah, that's just my own sort of like live show anxiety coming through there. So how did your relationship, what am I missing? Am I missing anything? I'm about to ask you how your relationship with Roadrunner comes to an end, but I feel like we've jumped a bit.
I don't know if you're missing anything from that. I mean, you know, I think, you know, it was just a, you know, it's a project that came together. It was a Herculean feat by various people, whether it be Monty and Dave Rath from an A&R side, or Harlan and Justin from a logistical side of getting people here and there. And I know that, you know, Colin Richardson's wife had a lot to do with it as well. Yes. But I'm just talking about the people, you know, inside the label. Yeah, it was a lot to put together, and, you know, it got it done in the end. I mean, I guess that's all I can say about it.
It happened.
Yeah, it was a thing. It was great. It was a great project. It was a great show. Yeah.
Well, no one's done anything since like it. So what else can you say, man? It's good shit.
Maybe they saw how much we sold and were like, this isn't worth it.
Right. How does your time at the label come to an end then? Because you said you left in 2006.
I want to say 2006. So it's kind of funny. So I'm gonna combine your questions about my, you know, my best and worst and how I ended up leaving the label together. So
okay.
So the best was actually, you know, as I said, I was a huge Machine Head fan. And, you know, I had thought initially when I first met Rob Flynn that it was the last time I'd ever see him, because I literally met him when he asked to be let off the label. Mm-hmm. And so I obviously, you know, I became their product manager when they came back through the Ass of Empires, and, you know, developed a good rapport with the band and with Joseph, their manager. Mm-hmm. And when they went to record their Elegies DVD, which I believe is at Brixton, I think, in the UK.
Elegies. Sounds about right. I think they did one at Manchester as well, didn't they?
Well, this was definitely just outside of London.
Okay.
And so they flew me out there for the taping.
Okay.
Which to me, you know, like, I mean, to have like, you know, your sort of musical heroes be like, hey, can we pay for you to come join us for this sort of, you know, major event? It was their first DVD live.
You're right, Brixton, yeah.
Brixton, yeah. So that was definitely my highlight. I mean, you know, being flown, you know, across the ocean to go see like one of your favorite bands.
Were you doing any work, or was it just a matter of?
No, it was just a matter of like, they wanted to show me that they appreciated how much like I had really like just, you know, busted my ass for them, because I loved them. And, you know, they had, you know, they had gone from what was the album with Bulldozer?
Was that the Supercharger?
They had gone, you know, from that, where they felt that they just weren't getting any attention or anything, and they came back, and, you know, I was all about just doing everything I could to break them in the US. And
Yeah.
so to just, and not only because, you know, they just happen to be a band that I love, but just, you know, to have a band show you that they appreciate what you've done for them.
Yeah.
Because, you know, some bands are better at that than others. And, you know, I mean, no matter what you do, and no matter who you work with, every once in a while, it is nice to know that like someone appreciates what you're doing for them.
Yep.
And so that was, you know, that was just, you know, when those people happen to be people that you really respect and like, that was definitely a high point for me.
Yeah, it's doubly good.
Yeah. As far as a low point goes, I would say it was the Roadrunner United concert.
Okay.
I you know, I think the writing was on the wall for me. As that concert was going on, or, you know, in the days leading up to it. So, you know, at the end of every year, you would meet, well, before, like, you know, in late November, early December, you'd basically have your review and you'd be, you know, told you're getting this pay increase or whatever. And mine had been pushed to January of the following year.
Right.
And everyone else's was in December.
Right. Okay.
And so, you know, I could tell that there was a very good chance that, you know, they were being very kind to not let me off, to not fire me before the holidays.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a very bittersweet night that, like, you know, I was part of this huge, you know, this huge event celebrating 25 years of this label. And, you know, I was an integral part of it, but I knew that it was probably the last thing I was ever going to be doing for the label.
Yeah.
And so that was, you know, that was definitely a bummer. You know, I mean, I would have liked to have, I mean, I had a great time that night, and, you know, I had formed a lot of relationships with a lot of the artists who played that night. So I got to sort of spend the time with them. But I, you know, I went through the whole experience knowing it was probably the last.
Yeah. And what was the writing on the wall then? Was it just like, you don't have to overshare, but there's always like there's an instinctual feeling when you're in a job that's fated, right? So I guess, was it that, or was it just like, was there a few sort of catalysts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I was well aware. So basically, if I had to describe, like, I am the best worker you could want. I am one of the worst employees.
Yeah.
Like, if you absolutely needed to get something done, I'm the guy you go to. And that's what I was at Roadrunner. I was the first one in, I was the last one out, because I didn't drink. I never was hungover. Like, I also loved my job.
Yeah.
You know, and so if really, like, something had to be done, you gave it to me. If something had to be done and you didn't want to get a shitty attitude about it, you probably would go to someone else.
Right.
So, you know, I think that dealing with that shtick gets old after 6 years. And, you know, I think that I had just worn out my welcome. You know, and you just get that feeling when you stop being included in meetings that maybe you used to be included in.
Right. Yeah.
You know, or you find out that something's happening with one of your projects that you were never even, you know, no one ever even brought it up to you.
Yeah.
Like, that's really weird, because usually none of this would happen without it going through me. You know, so I mean, you know, it was not, I was not, you know, Sherlock Holmes. It didn't take, you know, that to see what was going on.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And it was, you know, it was unfortunate. It takes going to other places sometimes to realize how well something, or how good you had it.
Sure.
And I think that, you know, Roadrunner being, I mean, other than 6 months at Island Def Jam being really my introduction to the music business, it was all I knew.
Yeah.
And so you sort of take it for granted, right? And then you go elsewhere and you're like, holy shit, Roadrunner really was on top of their game. Like, so yeah, so there was definitely some of that, but, you know, with age comes wisdom, right?
Sure.
So I'd say that was, yeah, that was, you know, I could see the writing on the wall, because you can definitely see you're being left out of things.
I think one of the things I round these off with, as the music kicks in, it fades out, is what, like, can we summarize like Roadrunner? Because I know why I like Roadrunner as a consumer, but have you got like any words or phrases or like anything that encapsulates the essence of why Roadrunner is important?
Yeah, I mean, why it's important. I mean, I can say, words that come to mind for me, just my experience with it. It's like a family. It was a team. It was a group of people who were actually like united in a single goal.
Yeah.
Which is a rarity, I think. When something went wrong, no one ever looked to point a finger. It was everyone got together to figure out how to solve it. It didn't matter. Right. We were all unified in a goal. I mean, why is it important? I mean, I think to any metalhead, who, music being probably one of the most defining aspects of their life.
Yeah.
I mean, they just made a shit ton of good music. And
it wasn't an accident.
It wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
It was just, they weren't afraid to take the label. It wasn't afraid to take chances, and wasn't afraid to, maybe do things differently or do things their own way, which was, obviously resonated. Not only did the music resonate, but the label and the image that the label projected resonated with people. I think it was real.
It's the last great. I'm playing with the idea of it being the last great independent label. I don't think it's necessarily true. It certainly is for rock and metal, but
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to say that, right? Because again, you were talking earlier about like, being able to how you experience music in your formative years, right? So because we're getting older, right? Like new labels like a Sumerian or something like that, we may not see the way we see as Roadrunner.
Yeah.
Because Roadrunner came at a special time in the music industry, but also came at a particular time in our lives, right? And as you get older, I don't know, the coolest record label doesn't mean as much anymore, right? I mean, I think music in general has been devalued now too. So it's hard to think that there's ever going to be a time where a label could make such a statement, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's correct. Your opinion is factually correct in that sense.